All right, good morning, everyone. This is Christy Ballou, Director of Teacher Certification. Welcome to the Legislative Affairs Policy and Workforce Support Monthly Call for today, July 18th. First, we're going to go ahead and get started with our legislative updates, then we'll go through BESI updates, certification, healthy communities, and the important call summaries. Hope everyone has been enjoying their summer break. School will be starting before we know it. So let's go ahead and discuss some of the legislative updates that have happened recently. So as some of you might be aware, there were quite a few bills in this last legislative session that affected certification. On our last monthly call, Ethan talked through the legislative session in general. We are currently reviewing all of this legislation and its impact on BESI policy, and we're going to be providing an implementation plan in the future. Some of the things I'm sure you're aware of and are probably anxious to find out what's going to happen with that are the Praxis 1 core. There was some legislation around master's degrees. There was some legislation around out-of-state reciprocity. And then, of course, the criminal history checks for certification. BESI recently had an update in regards to one of these in particular, and so I'm going to provide that update first. And then the rest of them, we are going to be providing an implementation plan later on down the road. So the hottest topic probably is the Praxis 1 core. And as some of you may be aware, letters were sent out last week when the president of BESI, President Garvey, signed a waiver of BESI policy. So the deal with the laws are, yes, the laws change things. However, BESI policy legally can be more restrictive than the law. It just can't be less restrictive. So right now, all of that BESI policy is in place around Praxis core. Well, what happened last week was President Garvey signed a waiver of BESI policy so that teacher preparation providers can actually enroll and schedule their candidates into courses for the fall semester. So that way there won't be any kind of delay in the impact on these two acts of the regular legislative session on enrolling students into teacher preparation programs. They made that decision probably partially because teacher preparation programs have to hire additional staff if they're going to open up more sections of courses and the scheduling and everything that goes underway. And so that was waived last week. What was not waived were the requirements around Praxis core for initial certification. We are going to bring additional policy recommendations based on the two acts listed above, 707 and 244, to BESI for consideration at the August meeting. That August meeting is not until like the 23rd or the 24th. So no changes to BESI policy outside of this for entrance into a teacher preparation program will occur until after that date. Now, this particular slide shows the specific pieces of the bulletin that are affected. So it's the effects in Bulletin 996, in the traditional program and in the alt-cert program that require the passage of the core academic skills prior to entrance. Those two sections were waived. In addition to that, in Bulletin 746, the certification bulletin, the section 515 and 535 around specific certificates that a candidate has to have while they're enrolled in an alt-cert or an undergrad program, those specific certificates, the policy was waived for that. So that's your PL and your resident or R certificate. So it's only removing the requirement of the passage of that test prior to entering into while participating in a teacher preparation program. It did not waive the current BESI requirement for passage of Praxis core upon completion of those teacher preparation programs. That was not a part of the waiver that was signed. The waivers for this particular piece They will be in effect from the date of signature last week until policy revisions are considered as notice of intent and declaration of emergency at that August 24th BESI meeting. And of course, it will be subject to the ratification of the full board. So what does that really mean? So what that means in terms of certification is that the exam portions for the following certificates look like this. The Praxis core won't be required for issuance of a resident certificate. Praxis content will be required for the renewal of the resident certificate. There's been quite a bit of confusion out there about people think that it's all Praxis. It is just the Praxis core. That's that reading, writing, and math. So it's not required for issuance of the resident, but the content will be required for the renewal of the resident certificate. The Praxis core is not required for issuance of a PL or a practitioner's license, but the content is required for issuance of a PL license. And then for the TAT, which many of you probably have questions about the TAT, the core reading and writing is still in BESI policy. So for right now, it is still required for issuance of that TAT, or temporary authority to teach. Now, the caveat to this is when we're looking at the renewal of a TAT, in other words, somebody that has a TAT already, they would have had that reading and writing at least for the Praxis core. And the policy says that you need 2 attempts at the Praxis that's required for entrance into a program. So since it's worded that way, that means that we won't be looking for any piece of the Praxis core for the renewal of the TAT only. We'll be looking for 2 attempts at the Praxis content exam, which is still required for entrance into a program. Now that gets a little crazy and wild and hairy, but hopefully this slide will help everybody as to what that means for right now. Any questions there? I'll pause so that we can take any questions if we need to. All right, so moving on to the regular certification piece, wanted to update you all that this call will be the last official legislative affairs policy and workforce support call. You know, that team has kind of been split up a little bit. And so what will happen is we'll have the certification office will now have a monthly call devoted solely to certification. So this is going to begin with the August monthly call. It's generally going to fall on the same timeline, like the 3rd Monday of each month. We did bump the time to 10:30 a.m. Any changes due to like a BESI meeting or a holiday will be included on that school system support calendar. It is a new link. Oh, the link didn't show up. I'll have to make sure that when we post this, that it will have the new link to that new call on this particular slide. So we're still going to post this deck where we normally post it. If we have any changes in where we're going to post our future calls, they're still working all of that out. I will let you know in our next monthly call. But our next monthly call, the 3rd Monday of August, is actually right before BESI, and so it really won't do us any good to have it on the 3rd Monday for the August call. So we bumped it to the 4th Monday just for the month of August. Looks like we have a question. As a point of clarification, will there be a proposal in August to eliminate Praxis 1 requirements? We are bringing proposals to BESI for the August meeting, and we'll see what BESI does with those. But yes, we're going to try and align them with the laws that are in place. Certification processing, just wanted to flag this for you all. I know you all know that it's our peak processing season. We're getting about 900 applications per week. The staff that I have can only process about 525 per week. We are training some new staff, but it takes about a year to train the new specialists. So we're not going to see an immediate reduction in processing time, but our processing time right now is about 60 business days, or if it's easier to tell your applicants that's about 12 to 14 weeks. Some people get a little confused about what a business day is and is not. And so we usually have that in the reply email once you submit an application. We are completely aware that this is not ideal. We do have both short-term and long-term solutions that we're working on to reduce that processing time. We do appreciate your patience while we're working through this particular backlog. You may or may not have noticed an uptick in the number of applications that have been able to be processed. Some of the short-term solutions include overtime, borrowing staff from other teams that can do some basic combination of files and such for us, so that our team doesn't have to spend the time doing that. They can spend the time doing the processing. So we're working on several solutions to reduce that time, and hopefully in about 12 to 14 weeks, we'll get a more reasonable processing time. Literacy updates. This is just kind of a reminder about the June BESI. At June BESI, we did propose some revisions to certification policy. They were approved, and those were to align with the literacy requirements that were proposed in law last year. And these literacy updates do have a future effective date. So if you missed we did flag this for you in June, but if you missed our June call, some of those updates include updating the certification requirements to include the adoption of a teaching reading exam that assesses these updated literacy competencies. So it's a new exam that we adopted. We also specified the type of reading coursework that's required to align with the science of reading competencies. And we included the adopted science of reading training as options to meet some of those certification requirements. So one of the other pieces to that is the LDOE is partnering with ETS to update that teaching of reading exam specifically for Louisiana in the future. That likely won't be ready until next year, which means we'll have to bring an update to this policy that was approved. But the future effective date will still remain the same. And if I recall, it's like 2024 to give teacher prep providers and ETS and all to get everything prepared and to be ready for that future effective date. So in the meantime, the more broad interpretation of the law regarding the teaching reading will be used. Whenever we're issuing initial certification, we're going to be looking for the following things. If it's from a traditional program, law says that we have to use semester hours only. So we'll be looking for 3, 6, or 9 semester hours of reading coursework, depending on what grade level the person completes. For alternate programs, in addition to the semester hours, they have other options. They can use the ABESI adopted teaching reading exam, the 5206, or they can assign an assurance document that indicates that they did the contact hour equivalent. Just keep in mind, like alternate programs that are a traditional or a university program, we're still going to look for those semester hours first, because that is allowable in law as well, even for alt-cert programs. If your program was approved to offer something other than coursework, then we'll be looking for these other 2 items. If a university doesn't offer the reading competencies via coursework, then we are going to be looking for that signed assurance document indicating the contact hour equivalent. And the only one I'm aware of right now that does that is ULM. If there are any others of you out there, please reach out and let us know so we can make sure that we have everything in alignment with what you have. And just keep in mind that reading requirements are outlined in law, and so we do have to consider those requirements when we're adding additional areas to existing certificates. So for example, if they completed a traditional program, we have to look for the hours. If they completed an alt-cert program, we have to look for either the hours or these other 2, the teaching reading exam or the signed assurance document, to meet those reading requirements. Geometry. At April BESI, we proposed some revisions to Bulletin 746 around adopting a geometry add-on. It was adopted in April, and the requirements for that are just a valid standard professional level teaching certificate and passing that geometry content exam. So in June, those revisions were actually re-adopted, I guess you'd say, as emergency rule. And we did this to make sure that educators can take advantage of this policy over the summer. So it is something that is effective immediately. If someone wants to take and pass that geometry content exam, they can add it to their teaching certificate. Hopefully it will help to address the shortage of math teachers across the state. Teacher Certification Appeals Council. Just wanted to remind everyone that the next TSAC meeting is on September 1st. So the deadline to submit an appeals packet for the September meeting is about a month prior to that, which is August 4th, which means that to be eligible to appeal, that educator has to first have applied to our office, been denied before they can appeal. So just wanted to flag this for you all because that is something that's coming up at the beginning of school, the deadline is, and so wanted to put that at the front of your mind if you have an educator that needs to appeal. And please remember that all decisions of TSAC are final. That is something that is outlined in law. And so there's nothing else that we can do once TSAC makes their decision. Any questions for those few slides? I'll pause here before we move on to the certification reminder section. Please feel free to unmute or pop a question in the chat.
Good morning. This is Eric from St. Charles Parish Public Schools. Just a question and a question statement, I don't know, what have you. I'm dealing with several teachers that their level 1 has expired or is expiring, typically sometime between May and July. As y'all are aware, we cannot renew those until CIS finalizes their evaluations, which doesn't take place until mid-August to September. Is there any consideration, or what would be the avenue for consideration to make those initial level 1s good for 4 years, because they cannot be renewed in time? I mean, you're going to be dealing with this forever. You know, every year we're going to have folks that have expired certificates. We just let them continue to work, and we don't adjust their pay or anything. We could still consider them certified because it's really no fault of their own. And it doesn't make sense to renew the level 1 for just 1 year when they're, you know, they have been evaluated. Everything on our end looks like they're clear and they're good to go, and it's been submitted to CIS. So my question or my proposal, and I don't know how this could happen, but to maybe consider that initial level 1 good for 4 years, and that way you don't have to go through that. You know, within those 4 years, you should have, within the acceptable timeline, 3 successful CIS evaluations. So just my thoughts, and I'd like to hear your response to that.
Well, I wasn't here when that initial policy was put into place. I imagine it has to do with mimicking the law, and they did allow those 2 one-year extensions for situations like that. But with us bringing additional policy revisions in the coming months, that is something that we could consider. Just keep in mind, we do have solutions in policy for that, so I'm not sure how that'll be received, but it's definitely something I can put on the radar, and we can discuss with our policy and our legal team and see what they have to say.
Yeah, like I was saying, you know, I understand you can renew your level 1 additional year, but you know, that's $50, and you know, it just doesn't seem to make sense. You know, I don't know what the thought was when they set it up the way they did, but that's just my 2 cents. So I'll shut up now, but thank you.
Sure, we always appreciate feedback, and we will definitely take it into consideration and see what we can do. It doesn't hurt to put it on the table. It's definitely going to be a no if we don't ask about it. So, any other questions? All right, so we'll move on to the certification reminders section. These are generally slides that we have provided before, but if you've missed a call or something like that, then this is the section that you can go to. Just want to flag for everybody about the Childcare criminal background check, that CCCBC system. That is only to be used if an individual is teaching in a publicly funded early learning center and going to be on that campus. So in many instances, school systems in the K-12 setting should not be using this at all for your K-12 teachers. There's all sorts of federal restrictions involved, and so it's only to be used for early childcare. These are some of the reasons. The other pieces to it are that criminal background check is slightly different than the criminal background check that you're completing for employment in a K-12 setting. And so you could receive potentially two different answers, whether a person is cleared or not, or eligible or ineligible. And so that's another reason that it would make it super confusing for you all. So just make sure if they're in the K-12 setting, employment for your school system, you're using a regular employment for a school system criminal background check. If they're in a publicly funded early learning center, then you would use that CCCBC system. Now, there are going to be in some instances where an educator would need both, but it's very few and far between. Just keep in mind that if you use that CCCBC system for something else other than its original intended purpose, it is a direct violation of federal regulations and would be subject to those appropriate consequences. So wanted to make sure that we flagged this for you all. Your superintendent should have gotten a letter regarding this probably late May, early June. We're going to be following up at the beginning of the school year and sending it out to human resource points of contact just to be sure that you all got it and it trickled down to you all over the summertime to make sure that you're aware. Again, in most instances, it'll be separate because it's two separate entities, but there may be some educators that maybe go back and forth. Maybe they, are teaching as a part of your public school system and they're on the same campus as the CCCBC, a publicly funded early learning center. They may have to cross that, that piece of the campus, so they might need both of them. So just make sure that in the appropriate setting, you're doing the appropriate criminal background check. If you have any questions about it, you can contact Hayden Malansaw at hayden.malansaw@la.gov. But we first do advise you to consult your legal counsel first, because they will know your situation more specifically than we will. Again, remember, if they're employed on the campus of an early learning center, you use CCCBC system. It's only good for the purpose of working in the early learning center. If they're employed in the pre-K-12 setting, then they would need to have a fingerprint-based background check through Louisiana State Police. And if they need to be certified, which this is where some of the overlap comes from. So some of those folks in those early learning centers do need an ECAC or early childhood ancillary certificate. And so those would be individuals that may need both of them done. Anyway, any questions, please reach out to Hayden Malansaw at la.gov. Some reminders about April Bessie. There were some exams that were updated mostly through the science section of EPS, but also early childhood, school counselor, and school librarian. We will be updating our Praxis chart as well. There is going to be a one-year overlap for old exams and new exams to be used. And so just wanted to flag this for you all. We did update our application April 1st of this year, and those were required to be used by May 1st. We always encourage you to download the latest version of the application before you submit it into the online portal. With these potential policy changes that are coming up in August, that means that we'll likely have to do another round of revisions for some of those applications that will be affected by that policy. So be on the lookout for new applications in coming months as well. That's why it's always best to really just download the latest version before you send it to your teacher candidate. Any other questions? see, there's a question about a Praxis waiver document. Let me see if I can open it to see what that document says. So it looks like that is the letter that was sent out to, there were several groups that it was sent out to. That's the letter indicating the information that I did on the first few slides of this deck about the Praxis core waiver, that on July 14th, President Garvey did include a waiver. I don't know that that document is publicly available anywhere. I know that it was sent to several groups. Give me just a second and I'll see which groups it was sent to. Let's see. I know it was sent out to teacher preparation providers. It was sent out to the HR Association, so LAFESPA. It was sent out to LACTI, which is also a preparation provider group. And I believe it was also sent out to LAE, is what it says in my text message. I'm not sure where it's available publicly. I can find that out. And if it will be available publicly, let's see. That was, who that was? Karen. All right, Karen, I will reach back out to you to see, or included in this deck to see if it is going to be available publicly. Let's see, there's another question. So it looks like there's a question about, due to the current processing times, will applicant have to pay again if the application they submitted was valid at the time it was submitted, but has since been updated during processing time? So to answer your question, no, they won't. So we take a look at the submission date and what was required at the submission date for the application version, if that's what you're asking about. So for example, if they submitted an application on April 28th, it didn't have to be the version that was required by May 1st. But May 1st going forward, anything submitted May 1st, it does have to be that current version. So we do take a look at application submission time. I hope I answered your question. All right. Karen, can you send me an email to make sure that I have your correct email? It's christy.ballou@la.gov. I need to make sure that y'all are on the preparation provider list. I don't control that list, but I can make sure that we can get you on it. Any other questions?
This is Teresa from LRC. For practitioner's license, moving to a level 1 and the needing for 180 days, but all teaching, but also like the fact that licenses are taking so long to like come back and you want to get something done in like 1 year. Is it like use your best judgment for the 180 days? Like if we apply right now, next year around this time, we can apply for a level 1 if they've done everything and have the PL, even if their license won't be issued for another like 2 months or something?
So are you talking about they have to teach on that certificate for a certain number of days, or they have to be considered a teacher of record on? Can you kind of give me a little context of what you're talking?
My understanding is you have to be on a practitioner's license for 180 days. That's my understanding. That's a state requirement.
Okay.
So that was where the question was coming from.
Gotcha. The 180 days doesn't sound familiar to me. That might be in Bulletin 996. I'll circle up with the folks in preparation and make sure, number one, that the two bulletins are aligned. But we're going to look for certification based off a certification policy, and our policy says something about they have to hold the practitioner's license for a year. And so that's what we'll be taking a look at.
I'm sure that's what it is. The 180 days is just the
Like
number
classroom
of
days.
teacher day. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not here to start any like let's not change anything. I don't want to cause a ruckus. I just want to have level ones processed.
Right. Well, likely if it's something that was submitted this time of year, I mean, we're working to decrease our processing time, of course. But during our peak season, if it's something that's submitted during our peak season anyway, which level ones usually are, it's possible that like by the time it's processed during that second peak season, that it will be close enough anyway, if that makes sense.
Sounds good.
Any other questions?
Christy, Matt Scruggins here, St. Landry. I have a question regarding the waiver of Praxis 1. Is it my understanding that the waiver of Praxis 1 or Praxis 1 is only waived for a person to be enrolled in an alt certification program?
To be enrolled into a teacher preparation program, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And any certificates that are associated with that. So for example, they're required to be on a resident certificate if they're in a traditional program. So it's waived for that. And they're also required to be on a PL if they're enrolled into an alt cert program. And so it's waived for issuance of the PL.
Right. And as a follow-up for those folks who enroll in an alt certification program with the waiver of Praxis 1, then the provider would go ahead and submit application for a practitioner's license in the event that the person qualifies for such.
Correct. So again, all those pre-service certificates are submitted by the teacher preparation provider. So you are correct. Yes.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Again, please feel free to unmute or type in the chat. All right, so as I mentioned, we'll go ahead and move on. Healthy Communities, they've moved to another team, so we don't have any updates from them at this time. Let's take a look at our important dates. So you'll notice we have the non-public school council meeting tomorrow. Superintendent's Advisory Council is later on this month. The Louisiana Environmental Education Commission is also on that same day. And then for August, we have August 4th is that deadline to appeal for the September TSAC meeting. August 21st is the Bessie retreat. August 22nd is the Bessie committee meeting. August 23rd is the full board meeting. And then August 29th is our next official call for this group. It'll be the certification monthly call. I'll make sure that the link to that call is included in this deck. It's also already included on the school system support calendar. Apparently with some of my other technological difficulties this morning, like my camera not working, that link did not stay when I put it on that slide, but I'll make sure that it gets put there. September 1st is the TSAC meeting. And then if you're submitting a mentor teacher application that needs to be processed by October 1, you know, there's some funding that is associated with that. Make sure that you get those in by September 1st. So we want to start that flag now for you all. Any other questions from anyone today? Again, feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat.
Hey, Christy, this is Eric again. Sorry, I have so many questions for y'all.
That's what it's for.
So I am working on helping our folks make sure they maintain their certification. On the Teach Louisiana website, we used to have the certificate expiration report, and it's only showing 2020. So I can't see anybody moving forward past June 30th, 2021. That may be, well, I'm sorry, I'm sure I could see it. But anyway.
Not associated with your school system, right? Yes, we transitioned, if you don't mind, I can just pause you right there. We transitioned to a new data system. You know, that's part of the EdLink 360. We did put in a ticket to get this resolved with the developer. I can ping him again for that particular piece.
Awesome. And then is there a similar report for like your like ancillary certificates, you know, counselors, speech pathologists, et cetera, et cetera?
You know, I don't know what business rules he has listed on that report, but I will see if that is included or not, or if it's something that can be created.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, we will, yes, we will do what we can to get that. I'll have to reach out to the developer and see. Just so that this is a flag though, it is a very antiquated system. I don't know what the business rules are, and I don't know if it's capable of tying to the new system. Hopefully it is, but I'll reach out to the developer and see what they can do, and maybe I'll provide that as an update on our next call. I'm not a technology person, so I can't tell you much about that particular piece. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all for joining today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your summer before we get back to the grind even more so in August. And I know y'all like us, there's no summer really. But thank you all for what you do, and y'all have a good afternoon.